Last time we talked about cognitive development, and now in this video we're going to talk about social development. The important word here is attachment. That is, we have to, very early in life, make a bond with the caregiver, typically mom, which really is the contact we have with the world around us. Now, the attached caregiver, because we used to believe that was because she provided the nourishment. She's the one that fed us our food. That when we sucked, we got nourishment. And so that's why we attached ourselves to the mom, the caregiver. But actually, that's not completely true. Harry and Margaret Harlow, famous psychologists, actually worked with infant monkeys, and they gave them surrogate mothers. Really two kinds of surrogate mothers. A wire mother, which was just made of wire and with a block head, but this also had a feeding tube that the infant monkey could drink from, and then a cloth mother, a soft cloth with sort of fuzzy and warm, but no feeding tube. And what the monkey would do is it would go to the wire mother when it wanted nourishment, because that's where the milk was, and suck, but would stay most of the time, essentially all the time when it wasn't feeding, with the cloth mother. So the nourishing wire mother and the comfortable cloth mother, the infant preferred the cloth mother. He called that contact comfort, the fact that it got really comfort from contact with this fuzzy and warm mother. A very important phenomenon. So it's the contact and the nurturing of the mother, not necessarily just the nourishment that it provided. Now, Bobi is the psychologist who developed attachment theory, and he actually studied infants in orphanages, and the belief was that the orphanages provided nourishment and they provided all the things the child needed, and so they would develop normally. But what Bobi discovered was they didn't develop normally. They had cognition deficits, they had mental health deficits, because what they didn't have was this contact comfort from the caregiver. In fact, most orphanages in the first part of the 20th century, when he developed attachment theory, had 10 or 15 infants per helper, per caregiver. So they just didn't have that contact, and they didn't have that attachment that was so important for normal development, according to Bobi. A colleague of mine, Tiffany at the University of Miami, she actually is the director of the Touch Research Institute at University of Miami, believes that touch is very important. In fact, she found when she was working in a neonatal laboratory where they had infants that were severely small and fragile because they were premature, that if you touch them and just massage them with touch, they develop much quicker, they develop better, and they gain weight faster, simply by this ability to touch them and providing massage. And she found, by the way, that this touch really is amazing intervention in creating normal, healthy social development. Contact comfort, or attachment to the caregiver. But also, touch is important, but also familiarity is important. For example, we know with lots of animals, there's a critical period for developing attachment early in life. In fact, if certain animals do not have a mother, if their mother died while they were still very small infants, that the object that they are familiar with, the one that's there, they'll develop attachment to that object. For example, imprinting, that's what it's called. I went to a center, for example, that takes wildfowl, geese and cranes, and they don't have a mother, so they don't learn how to migrate. So they actually use an ultralight airplane, and the geese learn to follow that airplane, and they learn how to fly together and have normal migration. I once, by the way, when I was a child, I had 200 chickens. I sold eggs as my 4-H project. And I once had a rooster, and of course, if you get a rooster, you don't want it to be with the chickens, the hens, because you want the eggs to develop without the rooster's help. And so I took the rooster out of the chicken pen, and since it was a little small infant, it imprinted to me. So everywhere I went for about 2 years, the rooster followed me. Very interesting sort of attachment. It imprinted to me. So there's this critical period that after that it won't occur. Now, another thing, if the caregiver that is attached to is separated from the infant, then anxiety will occur. And by the way, this separation anxiety occurs in all cultures. So, and as Murray Ainsworth points out, and there's a film in your OLI that you can look at and see this, there's a difference between secure attachment and insecure attachment. That is where you have a normal anxiety when the caregiver is taken away and where you don't have that because of the insecure attachment. And watch the films, you'll see that in OLI. Now, Kagan is a psychologist who studied separation anxiety, and he actually looked at the percentage of children that cried when the mother left a room. For example, they'd bring the infant and the mother into a experimental room, and then the experimenter will come in, and then the experimenter and the mother would leave, and of course that creates separation anxiety in the child, and they looked at what percentage cried, and here you can see this sort of increase in crying up to about 13 months, and then a decrease. And he also looked at the difference between children that went to daycare and children that stayed home with the mother all the time, and really there were no differences. So daycare is not something that produces this insecure attachment. It really is separation from the mother that does that. No differences between daycare and staying at home, and it peaks at about 13 months. That's the peak of the critical period for separation anxiety. Now, the major psychologist in study of social development is Erickson. He was a psychoanalyst. He was not a scientist, but he developed from his observations about social development. And the reason he's such an important figure in theory about social development is because he dealt with the entire lifespan, from infancy all the way up through late adulthood. Let's look at what he found, what he said. He said that there's certain sort of challenges that occur at a particular age, and then there's, if you need to positively satisfy that challenge to move to the next stage. Again, a stage theorist. The first, less than a year, it's this challenge is trust versus mistrust. And the positive solution to that would be that the child develops a healthy trust relationship with their caregiver, what we've been talking about, attachment. Between 1 and 3, the toddler, the challenge is between autonomy and shame doubt. And the satisfaction of that is when the child learns what it can control and what it cannot control in the environment. So it's just beginning to learn its relationship to its own behavior. The next stage is preschool, between the age of 3 and 6, and the challenge is between initiative and guilt. And the child, if to positively satisfy this, the child learns to be independent by exploring the environment. It learns to explore and be independent from the caregiver. Elementary school, between 6 and 12, the challenge is between industry and inferiority. And here, the child is learning to do things well, do things correctly, probably learn by standards of others, primarily in school. Then we have adolescence, the teenage years, and here the challenge is identity versus role confusion. And the adolescent, to satisfy it positively, the adolescent will develop a well-defined and positive sense of self in relationship to others. Then we have the adult stages, young adulthood, 20 to 40, and here the challenge is intimacy versus isolation, and the positive solution to that is the young adult learns to love and to have long-term commitments with others. Then middle adulthood, 40 to 60, and the challenge is generativity versus stagnation. And the positive solution to that is a person develops an interest in guiding the development of further generations, typically by becoming a parent. And then we have late adulthood, 65 and above, and the challenge is ego integrity versus despair. And here, the person develops, sort of accepts their life as it was or not. So that's Erickson, a developmental theorist that really has taken development to mean the whole lifespan from infancy to late adulthood, and has had tremendous influence on psychology. Thank you.